Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's webinar. It's the 10th of March, so we have again this 10th webinar on the hashtag Trust Standards, Building Trust in the Single Market and a Competitive Europe. It's a webinar that Sun and Senelec realized in cooperation with Applia, Home Appliance Europe. So please, my name is Els, and I will be your webinar moderator today. As usual, you will be muted during the webinar. Webinar control panel. If time allows it, we will reply your questions right away after the webinar. If your question remains unreplied, then you will have it in the report available online on the website. Everybody who joins today will be informed when that information is available. You will also receive today via email the presentation that we used as well as the recording of the webinar. Should you be on Twitter, please feel free to tweet about the topic. We have our hashtag Trust Standards, of course, and the hashtag 1010 webinar. So let me please give the floor to the speakers of today. The speaker is my colleague Whitney, and we have our guest speaker from Applia. So please, Whitney and Mikhail, the floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Whitney Clark. I am a project manager at Senelec and work in governance and partnerships. I'm here today with my colleague from Applia, Home Appliance Europe, who will take a moment to introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. Michał Zakrzewski. I'm Policy Director in Applia. I do, among others, work on the topics related to single market, safety standards, etc. Happy to be here with you today.
Happy that you're here. In today's webinar, we would like to introduce to you hashtag Trust Standards. Hashtag Trust Standards started in 2019, highlighting 5 areas of public policy that are contributed to by standardization. This is trust in new technology, enhanced innovation for Europe, sustainable development goals of the UN 2030 Agenda, European industry ready to lead in international trade, and a harmonized single market. The focus of today's discussion is a harmonized single market and how standardization is a way of creating value for Europe while offering a cost-efficient and easier way to show compliance with union law. But before we get started, how do we recognize standards? Standards are everywhere. Currently, we have about 24,000 developed standards in Europe, which is a way of creating competitiveness and security. They play a fundamental role in making the single market more efficient by improving safety, protecting consumers, reducing red tape, and fostering innovation. Most of all, standards build trust. If you would like to know more about how to find standards, and especially how standards affect your daily life, please click this link to follow our spy gal as she finds standards that are affecting our everyday lives throughout the smart city. And once you can recognize standards, we can then get into how standardization is a key instrument for the single market. They are documents that set out specifications and other technical information with regards to various kinds of products, materials, services, and processes. Standards provide a basis for mutual understanding among individuals, businesses, public authorities, and other kinds of organizations. They facilitate communication, commerce, measurement, and manufacturing. If you look at this definition here, services and processes. They can help reduce costs, improve safety, enhance competition, and facilitate the acceptance of innovations. If you follow this link, you'll find the definition of the single market on the Commission website. But what we would like to emphasize today is the cooperation of different stakeholders. Standards provide a basis for mutual understanding among individuals. It shows a cooperation of stakeholders and allows for a consensus to be built from voices that often are overlooked. This cooperation of different stakeholders is a method of consolidating the single market, not only within Europe, but also the rest of the world. It is a valuable tool for strengthening the competitiveness of European companies, thereby creating conditions for economic growth. If you follow this link, studies, you'll find that in Nordic countries, standardization confirmed a 38% growth in productivity. The European standardization model allows for one European standard, EN, to replace 34 national standards. By having one single standard, a consensus is created of all the interested parties and then adopted throughout the European market, instead of 34 conflicting national standards. This helps significantly to ensure we have a common level of safety, security, and sustainability. These standards are developed by teams of technical experts who have particular knowledge of the specific sector or topic that is being addressed. The members of the technical committees, as well as subcommittees and working groups, are nominated by the national standards organizations. The members of SEN and CENELEC are comprised of NSBs and NCs, so national standard bodies and national committees, of 34 European countries. That's why we say one European standard replaces standards. SEN and CENELEC work with their members to develop and define European standards in response to specific needs that have been identified by businesses and other users of standards. Each NSB or NC is part of the SEN and CENELEC system and therefore obliged to adopt each European standard as a national standard and make it available to their customers in their country. They also have to withdraw any existing national standard that conflicts with the new European standard. Therefore, one European standard becomes a national standard in all 34 countries covered by SEN and CENELEC. To summarize, European standards published by SEN and CENELEC create a consensus and then adopted by SEN and CENELEC members. It is important to note that European standards are voluntary and there is no legal obligation for businesses to apply them. It is rather legislation, but it is not legislation itself. Around 30% of European standards published by SEN and CENELEC have been developed in response to specific requests. Standardization mandates issued by the European Commission. Many of these standards are known as HENs, H-E-N. They enable businesses to ensure that their product or services comply with essential requirements that have been set out in European legislation, EU directives. In such cases, we can say that the standard provides a presumption of conformity with the essential requirements of the relevant legislation. If you look at this slide, you'll find a link to Regulation 1025/2012. And this regulation shows the evolution of the relationship between the European standardization organizations and the European Commission since 1983. It is also an agreement of the roles standardization plays to support European policies and legislation. But what is the definition of a HEN? A HEN is a European standard that is developed on the basis of a request from the European Commission for the application of union harmonization legislation. Now I'll take a moment and offer the floor to my colleague to tell you more about the benefits of a well-functioning system.
Indeed, I will try to guide you on the benefits of the well-functioning system, of course, from the perspective of the association representing manufacturers. So harmonized standards for us are a critical tool to show compliance with the regulation or a directive, depending on the piece of legislation we are talking about. Still, they remain, and that's very important, a voluntary tool. So you can determine your compliance using the harmonized standards, but you can do that in any other way as well. I will explain that in a moment. What are the benefits of using the harmonized standard listed in the official journal? Industry is using this system of compliance with the legislation because it's pretty simple, reducing cost, as I said, simplifying the process, and being especially good for the smaller manufacturers. And then, as you can imagine, industry sees a clear benefit in this system, and it's of course motivated to sending experts to their technical committees, both on the national and the European level, because it's in the interest of the industry to develop a state-of-the-art standard that then can be used to determine compliance. However, unfortunately, we see recently some problems with the well-functioning of this new legislative framework. We even say that the principles are under challenge, and I will try to outline to you the current situation and explain why we believe that is the case. So, as Whitney mentioned already, the Standardization Regulation 1025, 2012, it's a kind of basis for the well-functioning of the new legislative framework and well-functioning of the whole system. If something is not working well, then we have problems. And unfortunately, we observed this over the last couple of years that in practice, references to many harmonized standards are either not cited at all in the official journal of the EU or not cited on time. That's a big problem for the manufacturers because they cannot use the standard. Also a problem for at least some market surveillance authorities that are struggling with checking the compliance of products on the market. And as a result, the competitiveness of the whole European industry is put at stake, is undermined. But then maybe for some of you, it's not 100% clear how the system looks like. Again, from the manufacturer perspective. So manufacturer or in some cases importer or authorized representatives declares compliance with the respective EU legislation by affixing CE marking, so-called self-certification or self-declaration. But then when using harmonized standards, and then I underline it strongly, which references are listed in the official journal of the EU under the respective act that the manufacturer is determining compliance with, the manufacturer enjoys so-called presumption of conformity. In the link, you can find a joint paper from the various industry representatives outlining the importance of this and outlining problems and also proposing some we believe, workable solution. In a nutshell, presumption of conformity means that the burden of proof is on the shoulders of the market surveillance authorities, not on the manufacturer. Manufacturer, by using the reference standard, enjoys presumption of conformity, and it's the market surveillance authority that needs to prove that the manufacturer is not compliant. And then, of course, that creates another big benefit for the whole system, is that any product legally placed on any of the EU 27 member states can then freely circulate and be sold in any of the EU member states. That's so-called internal market or a single market. But then, In order to have the well-functioning system, I already mentioned market surveillance authorities and overall system. It's very important to underline the fact that while we have the internal market and free flow of goods all over Europe, the market surveillance is still exclusive prerogative of the member states, or in cases of federal countries, like for instance Germany, even the states or counties. That makes the system very complex, and as you can imagine, there are several market surveillance authorities doing the job within the EU. And of course, some of them are more experienced, some of them are less experienced, some of them have more money, some of them less money, etc. But what we always, as industry, underline is that they should, as much as possible, cooperate with each other and exchange information, test reports, etc. They do that via the so-called ADCOs, administrative cooperation bodies, which are chaired by the European Commission, respective DGs and units for respective piece of legislation. And then currently the system is governed by the EU Regulation 1020/2019 on market surveillance and compliance of products. As you can see, it has been approved less than 1 year ago, but in our opinion, improved the situation. And then new legislative principles, as I mentioned, are under challenge, but of course, we try to determine or say clearly from the side of industry what kind of elements we need to see to have the system functioning again well and improve. So key goals for the industry are to continue benefiting from the presumption of conformity. This is what I mentioned, the clear benefits of that. I encourage you to read the paper and then learn a bit more about that. Only feel free to ask any questions in this respect. Then to rely on timely citation of harmonized standards. We absolutely need to avoid delays, unnecessary delays in the citation of the standards. Then, in the interest of the European industry, is to enhance the competitiveness of the industry by streamlining the whole process in the new legislative framework system. And of course, last but not least, is to ensure alignment of international and European standardization as much as possible. And I will give the floor again to Whitney to continue with the topic.
Now we've understood that European standards are market-driven and ensure that European policies and legislation are implemented smoothly, and that the European Commission may ask the European standardization organizations to produce harmonized standards. These harmonized standards make up around 25% of the European standards. But the ultimate goal is to build a strong and reliable Europe. And building a strong and reliable Europe starts with trust. As one of the EU's greatest achievements, the single market is the world's largest market for goods, capital, services, and people. It removes obstacles to trade within the EU and allows European businesses to compete on the global stage. European standardization boosts European competitiveness because it's highly innovation-friendly and market-driven. The single standards model avoids fragmentation in the market and ensures coherence in the market. This is an effective use of industry and small-medium enterprises' resources that has a unique approach with no equivalent elsewhere in the world. European standardization provides a framework that strengthens the single market through various concepts of partnerships. This allows sudden deliverables to offer a sense of flexibility and adapt to the market needs with an expected speed for technical solutions. There is also the alignment of the International Standardization Organization and International Electrotechnical Commission System, ISO and IEC. The Standard commitment to international trade allows for a quicker alignment with international systems of trade. And about 72% of Standard standards are identical to IEC standards, while 33% of standards are identical to ISO standards. Again, we're seeing an alignment with ISO and IEC standards to enhance access to those global markets and really giving Europe the edge for competitiveness, being able to set the standard to which products and services are exported to Europe. So what are our key learning points today? I think we have quite a few of them, but these are the 5 main ones that we've enlisted as takeaways for today's webinar. The first key learning point is a harmonized single market creates cost-efficient value for Europe that complies with union law. The second is the single standards model is a unique advantage for Europe and boosts the competitiveness of Europe in international trade.
The third one would be the presumption of conformity as a critical element because it saves time, costs, and is a really easy tool, especially for the smaller manufacturers that otherwise would have to do complex and additional risk assessment in order to determine their compliance. Then the key element, as I mentioned, is timely citation of the harmonized standard in the official journal, which allows business to benefit from the mentioned presumption of conformity. And again, last but not least, any product legally placed on the market can circulate all over the whole EU 27 market, which creates the huge market for goods, and it's a key element to well functioning of the whole system.
Excellent. I would like to take a moment to thank Aplia for providing the perspective of both industry and manufacturers today, but also for explaining how standardization supports the single market. If you would like to know more about #trust standards or the other 3 pillars of the Centennial Declaration, we encourage you to look at our website at www.standardsbuildtrust.eu. Now I'm going to give